The rain hammered the windshield of the Maybach like 1,000 tiny fists, and Marcus Webb watched the little girl huddled under the street lamp through a curtain of water. She was 7, maybe 8. Her dress was the color of faded cotton candy, plastered to her thin shoulders. She was shaking, but her hands were clasped around something she held against her chest like armor, and when his driver rolled down the window to shout at her to get out of the road, she didn't flinch. She just lifted her chin and walked toward the car. The driver, a man named Gerald who had seen Marcus fire people for less, looked in the rearview mirror with wide, uncertain eyes. "Sir, she's coming toward us." "Should I wait?" Marcus said. He didn't know why he said it. He was late for a meeting that would determine the fate of a $3 billion merger. His phone was buzzing with messages from his CFO. The rain was soaking his suit just from the few feet between the curb and the car door. But something about the way she moved, that steady, resigned determination, held him in place. The little girl stopped at the back door of the Maybach. She didn't knock. She just stood there, looking at him through the tinted glass. Her eyes were enormous, dark brown, and they held none of the fear or desperation he expected. Instead, they seemed to be asking a question he didn't yet understand. "Sir," she said, her voice muffled by the rain and the glass. "Sir, can I give you a flower?" Marcus blinked. He was a billionaire who had been offered bribes in the form of yachts, private islands, and, once, a racehorse. He'd been propositioned in ways that would make most people blush. No one had ever asked him to accept a flower. He rolled down the window a crack. The rain sprayed in, cold and sharp. "What did you say?" She held up her hands. In them was a single dandelion. The stem was bent. The yellow petals were bruised and waterlogged. It looked like it had been trampled, then salvaged, then held in a grip so tight it was nearly destroyed. And yet, there it was. A small, defiant scrap of life in the middle of a storm. "My mom told me to give flowers to people who look sad," she said. "And you looked sad." Marcus Webb did not look sad. He looked like a man who had just closed a record deal. He looked like a man who could buy and sell everyone on this street without noticing the cost. He looked like he had everything. But he was sad. So profoundly, bone-deep sad that he'd forgotten it was even there. It had been there so long. It was just part of him, like his heartbeat or his breath. And this child had seen it. "Get in the car." He heard himself say that. The little girl didn't hesitate. She pulled open the door, scrambled onto the leather seat, and closed it behind her. Water dripped from her dress onto the carpet. She was shivering so hard her teeth were chattering. But she held out the flower again, unwavering. "Please," she said. "It's all I have." His driver was staring at him. "Sir, the meeting." "Cancel it," Marcus said. He reached out and took the dandelion. It was cold and wet. The petals stuck to his fingers. But when he closed his hand around the stem, the little girl smiled. It was a small, tentative smile, like she was testing it out to see if it still worked. "My name's Elena," she said. "But my dad called me Ellie." "Marcus," he said. "I know," she said. "You're on the TV. My dad used to watch you. He said you were a big deal." He was right, Marcus said. It came out more clipped than he intended, a reflex, a wall. But the little girl didn't flinch. "He's dead now," she said. "That's why I'm out here." Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. He had handled bankruptcies, lawsuits, and betrayals that would have broken lesser men. He had stared down boardrooms full of sharks. But this simple, unvarnished statement from a child who had no reason to trust him, struck him in a place he didn't know existed. "Where are you supposed to be?" he asked, his voice roughed. "I'm supposed to be with my mom," she said. "But she left." "When 2 days ago?" "She said she was coming back. She said she'd get food. But she didn't come back." She said it like she'd said it 100 times, like the repetition had worn away the edges. "So I thought maybe I'd find someone who looked like they needed a flower." "And you did." Marcus looked at the dandelion in his hand. It was dying. It would be dead within hours. And somehow, that made it more precious, not less. He thought about the deals he'd made, the lives he'd affected, the empire he'd built. He had never, in all his years, done anything as brave as offering a dying flower to a stranger. "Where are you sleeping?" he asked. "Under the bridge," she said. "The one by the park. It's dry mostly, but the rain makes it cold. And I don't have a blanket anymore. I left it." "Left it?" Another kid needed it more. She said simply. Something inside Marcus cracked. It wasn't the crack of pressure or strain. He was used to those. It was the crack of something long sealed, something he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. It was the sound of his heart opening to Gerald, he said. Take us to the penthouse. The driver hesitated. Sir, the meeting, I said cancel it. The car pulled away from the curb. Ellie looked around at the leather, the wood trim, the mini fridge stocked with sparkling water. She touched the seat like it was made of gold. This is the nicest car I've ever been in, she said. It's just a car, Marcus said. But he was looking at her, not the car. He was looking at the way her fingers were still shaking, the way her lips were turning blued. You need dry clothes, he said. And food. She looked at him with those enormous eyes. Are you going to take me to the police? They'll put me in a home. I don't want to go to a home. I heard stories. I'm not taking you to the police, he said. He didn't know where that came from, either. He was a practical man. He was a logical man. He was the kind of man who called the authorities and let them handle the mess. But with Ellie, logic had no foothold. Okay, she said. I trust you. He stared at her. You trust me, you don't know me. I know you took my flower, she said. That's enough. Marcus had to look away. He couldn't bear the intensity of that trust, the purity of it. It was the most terrifying thing anyone had ever given him that the penthouse was cold when they arrived. It was always cold. Marcus liked it that way, sterile, controlled, a fortress against emotion. But now, as Ellie stepped onto the marble floor in her bare feet, the cold seemed cruel. Come on, he said. I'll find you something warm. He led her to the guest bathroom and dug out a pair of sweats he'd never worn. They were too big for her, but she pulled them on anyway, her small body drowning in fabric. He made her soup. He watched her eat with a hunger that looked like pain. My dad used to make me soup, she said between bites. When I got sick, he'd put extra carrots in it because I liked them. Where is your mom now? Marcus asked. He had to ask. He couldn't help it. The question was a loose thread, and he couldn't stop pulling. She shrugged. I don't know. She went to the store, and she didn't come back. It's okay. She said she wasn't going to stay. She said she couldn't. I wasn't supposed to hear that, but I did. The words were matter of fact, but Marcus heard the wound beneath them. He had been a child once. He had been left once. He knew the hollow sound of a parent's half-truths. How long have you been on your own? He asked. She thought about it. A few months. Since my dad died. My mom got sad. Then she got gone. Gone. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw the flicker of something beneath her calm. Grief. Rage. Desperation. She left, she said. And I don't think she's coming back. Marcus sat down across from her. He was still in his wet suit. He was still soaked to the bone. And suddenly, none of it mattered. The merger, the calls, the empire, it was all noise. The only signal was this child. Ellie, he said. I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer me honestly. She nodded. Are you afraid of me? She looked at him for a long time. He saw her weighing him, measuring him, evaluating him like she'd done 1,000 times before. He saw the calculation behind her eyes, the survival instinct honed by months on the streets. No, she finally said. You look sad, but you're not mean. I know mean. You're not mean. Marcus felt his throat constrict. He had been called many things. Ruthless, ambitious, cold. Not a single person had ever called him kind. Not mean. That was the closest anyone had ever come. Thank you, he said. I'm not mean. And I'm not going to let anything happen to you. She smiled again, that tentative, testing smile. Will you keep my flower? He looked at the dandelion, sitting on the counter where he'd placed it. It was already wilting, but it was the only thing she'd given him, and he knew, with a certainty that shocked him, that he would keep it forever. Yes, he said. I'll keep it. Okay, she said. Then I'll stay. She finished her soup. He put her to bed in the guest room, in a bed that cost more than most people's rent. She fell asleep almost instantly, her body curled into a tight ball, her breath evening out into the rhythm of exhaustion. Marcus stood in the doorway and watched her. The rain was still beating against the windows, and the city hummed below them. He should have been in a boardroom. He should have been making deals. Instead, he was standing in his own home, looking at a sleeping child, wondering how she had undone him in a single hour that he walked back to the kitchen. He picked up the dandelion. It was pathetic, really, a dead weed, but he put it in a glass of water anyway, and he set it on the counter where he could see it. His phone buzzed. His CFO, his lawyers, the board. He ignored them all. He sat down at the kitchen island and stared at the flower. And for the first time in 20 years, Marcus Webb cried that he cried for the girl. He cried for her father, who had made her soup and picked her flowers and then died and left her alone. He cried for the mother who couldn't stay. And he cried for himself, for the boy he'd been, for the man he'd become, for all the years he'd spent building walls instead of bridges that when he was done, he looked at the dandelion again. It was still dying, but it was still there. And so was Ellie. Okay, he said to the empty room. Okay, I'll figure it out. He didn't know how. He didn't have a plan. He had never been more unprepared for anything in his life. But he had a flower in a glass of water and a child in his guest room, and for the first time in a very long time, he felt something that wasn't ambition. He felt purpose. That the next morning, Ellie found him in the kitchen. He was already dressed in a suit, ready for the meetings he'd rescheduled. She stood in the doorway, small and bleary-eyed, and looked at him like she was waiting for him to vanish. Are you going to send me away? She asked. No, Marcus said. Promise. He knelt down in front of her. He looked her in the eyes. He made a promise he didn't know how to keep. I promise. And then he opened his arms. She didn't hesitate. She ran into them, small and fierce, and held on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had abandoned her. Marcus held her back. He held her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever held. And he knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that he would never let her go. Sir, can I give you a flower? The question still echoed in his mind. He didn't know then that it was a lifeline. He didn't know then that she had saved him as much as he had saved her. All he knew was that he was holding a little girl in his arms. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he was home. That the interview room smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Marcus had been in thousands of rooms like this, but never on this side of the table. The social worker was a woman named Patricia Hollis, 50-ish, with kind eyes and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that came from decades of seeing the worst humanity had to offer. She had a clipboard in her hands and a stack of forms that seemed to multiply every time Marcus looked away. Mr. Webb, she said, her voice neutral but not unkind. Let me be direct with you. In my 23 years of doing this, I've never had a billionaire walk through my door asking to foster a child he found on the street. Marcus leaned back in his chair. He'd chosen his suit carefully this morning, something that said competent rather than intimidating. He'd even worn a tie he thought might look approachable. It was an absurd exercise in self-presentation, but he'd never been more nervous about an interview in his life. I'm aware it's unusual, he said. Unusual is one word for it, Patricia said. I could use others. Concerning, irresponsible, potentially dangerous to the child. She paused, letting the words land. You have to understand, Mr. Webb, we see a lot of people who want to foster for the wrong reasons. Some of them have good intentions, but good intentions don't always translate to good outcomes. Some of them have no intentions at all. They just want the check. I don't want the check, Marcus said. No, you don't, Patricia agreed. You want something else. What is it? The question hung in the air. Marcus had prepared for this. He'd rehearsed answers about altruism, about giving back, about the responsibility of wealth. But now, sitting across from a woman who had probably heard every lie in the book, none of those answers felt right. She gave me a flower, he said. Patricia blinked. I'm sorry, a dandelion. She was standing in the rain. She'd been sleeping under a bridge for 2 months. Her father died. Her mother abandoned her. And she walked up to my car and offered me a flower because she thought I looked sad. He paused. His voice was rougher than he'd intended. I'm not proud of who I've been, Miss Hollis. I've made my fortune by being ruthless. I've stepped on people. I've ignored things I should have seen. I've been so focused on winning that I forgot what it felt like to care about anything but the bottom line. And then this little girl walked up to me and saw through every single wall I'd ever built. She saw me. Not my money. Not my power. Me. And she gave me the only thing she had. He pulled something from his pocket. It was the dandelion, now pressed between 2 pieces of glass, preserved like a museum specimen. He'd had it done professionally, because he couldn't bear to throw it away. I've kept this, he said. Every day, I look at it, and I remember that someone saw something worth saving in me. And I want to be worthy of that. I want to be the person she thinks I am. Patricia was quiet for a long time. She looked at the dandelion. She looked at him. She looked at the forms on her clipboard, the forms that documented every failure and every heartbreak of the system she served. Her name is Elena, she finally said. Elena Cruz. She was born on December 12th, 6 years ago. Her father, Daniel Cruz, was a janitor at a public school. He died of lung cancer 14 months ago. Her mother, Maria Cruz, was last seen 2 months ago. She's been reported missing, but the police haven't found her. We think she may have left voluntarily. I know, Marcus said. Her father worked as a janitor for 11 years, Patricia continued. He made minimum wage. When he got sick, the hospital bills bankrupted them. They lost their apartment. They were living in a shelter before he died. After that, Maria couldn't cope. She started using. She left Elena in a hotel room 3 times before she finally just didn't come back. Marcus felt his hands clench into fists. He'd known some of this, but hearing it laid out in clinical detail made it real in a way that hurt. Elena has no surviving relatives, Patricia said. Her grandparents are dead. Her aunts and uncles have their own problems. She's been on the streets for 2 months. We've been looking for her, but she's good at hiding. She's been through the system before. She knows how to disappear. She was under a bridge, Marcus said. The one by the park. She said it was dry. Patricia nodded slowly. We've checked that bridge. She wasn't there. She hides from us. She doesn't want to be found. She wanted to be found by me, Marcus said. He didn't mean it as a boast. It was just a fact. She'd walked up to his car. She'd offered him her flower. She'd chosen him. Why do you think that is? Patricia asked. Why you? Marcus thought about it. He thought about the rain. He thought about the way she'd looked at him. He thought about the sadness she'd seen, the sadness he'd hidden so well. Maybe because I was the only one who stopped. He said that Patricia wrote something on her clipboard. She looked at him, and he saw something shift in her expression. It wasn't warmth, exactly. It was something closer to cautious hope. Mr. Webb, I'm going to be honest with you, she said. You have no experience with children. You have no record of community service. You have no parenting classes. Your lifestyle is not what we typically consider stable for a child. I know, Marcus said, but you have resources, she continued. Resources that could give Elena a life she's never had. And more importantly, you have her trust. That's not nothing. That's not nothing at all. She set down her clipboard. I'm going to approve your application for temporary foster care, pending a home visit and mandatory parenting classes. If those go well, we'll transition to a permanent arrangement. But I need you to understand something, Mr. Webb. This isn't a transaction. This isn't a deal you can walk away from. This is a child. And children require things that money can't buy. I know, Marcus said again. I'll be watching, Patricia said. Not just the state. Me. Because I've seen too many children broken by people who were supposed to protect them. I won't let that happen to Elena. It was a threat, and it was a promise. Marcus accepted both. I wouldn't let it happen either, he said that the home visit was scheduled for 3 days later. Marcus spent the intervening time in a state of controlled chaos. He had the penthouse professionally child-proofed. He bought clothes, toys, books, everything he could think of that a 6-year-old might need. He researched parenting techniques. He called his therapist twice. Ellie watched all of this with a wary curiosity. She didn't say much. She was still in the process of learning to trust him, and he could see her testing him in small ways. She'd ask for things just to see if he'd say no. She'd push boundaries just to see if he'd push back. She was a child who had been let down too many times to assume anyone would stay. But she was also softening. He could see it in the way she talked to him, the way she let him brush her hair, the way she'd started sitting closer to him on the couch. She was opening up, and it was the most terrifying and beautiful thing he'd ever witnessed. Marcus, she asked one evening. They were eating dinner, and she was picking at her food with her fork. Yes, are you going to keep me? It was the question he'd been waiting for. The question he'd been dreading. He'd thought about it so many times, rehearsed the answer so carefully, but now that it was here, he felt his throat close up. Yes, he said. I'm going to keep you. Forever, forever. She looked at him, those huge eyes searching his face. My dad said forever too. But he died. I know, Marcus said. I can't promise I won't die. I can promise I won't leave. I can promise I'll be here. Every day. Until I can't be. She thought about that. It was a more honest answer than she'd ever gotten from anyone, and she seemed to understand that. Okay, she said. I'll stay. The home visitor arrived at 10 a.m. on Saturday. She was a different woman, younger, with a clinical air that made Marcus feel like he was being inspected for hidden defects. She walked through the penthouse, making notes. She checked the safety locks on the cabinets. She looked at the fire extinguisher and the smoke detectors and the child safe covers on the outlets. Ellie followed her around. She didn't say anything, but she watched, and Marcus could see her evaluating the visitor the same way the visitor was evaluating him. "Elena," the visitor said. "Are you happy here?" Ellie looked at Marcus. She looked at the visitor. She thought about it. "He gave me a flower," she said. The visitor blinked. "I'm sorry, he gave me a flower. I gave him one first, but then he gave me one back. It's in my room." It was true. Marcus had given her a flower the next morning. A real one, from the florist, a perfect rose with petals that were still wet with dew. He'd done it without thinking, just a reflex, because she'd given him something precious and he'd wanted to return the gesture. And now she was using it as evidence. "He kept my dandelion," she said. "The one I gave him. He put it in glass. He said it was special." The visitor made a note. She looked at Marcus with something like approval. "You have a good rapport," she said. "That's more than half the battle." She asked more questions. Some of them were clinical, about schedules and routines and medical histories. Some of them were softer, about emotions and hopes and fears. Ellie answered with a calm that made Marcus ache. "My dad used to say, 'Don't trust anyone,'" she said at one point. "But he also said, 'If someone gives you a flower, they're trying. And trying means something.'" "He sounds like a wise man," the visitor said. "He was," Ellie said. "He was the wisest man I ever knew." After the visitor left, Marcus found Ellie in her room. She was sitting on her bed, holding the rose he'd given her. "Marcus," she said, "What? Are you going to be my dad?" The question hit him like a freight train. He hadn't expected it. He hadn't prepared for it. He didn't know what to say. "I can try," he said as she nodded. "That's what my dad said too." And then she smiled. It was a full smile, a real smile, and it lit up her whole face. "Okay," she said. "Then I'm going to call you Dad." "Dad," Ellie said, and the word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. He'd closed deals worth billions with less effort than it took to form a single syllable in response to that word. His throat was tight. His chest was tight. Everything was tight. And the little girl was looking at him with those enormous brown eyes, waiting, and he couldn't speak. "Was that wrong?" she asked, and her voice was smaller now, the confidence draining out of her like air from a balloon. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "No," Marcus said. The word came out like a croak. He cleared his throat. "No, that's not wrong. He stopped. He'd never been at a loss for words. He'd made his fortune with words, with persuasion, with the ability to articulate exactly what he wanted and make other people want it too. But this was different. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a child, offering him a title he hadn't earned. "Ellie," he said carefully, "I've never been a dad before. I don't know how to be one. I don't know if I'm good at it. I don't want to let you down." She considered this. He could see her processing, the same way she processed everything, with that eerie calm that came from too much experience. "My dad didn't know how to be a dad either," she finally said. "He learned. He made mistakes. He said sorry when he made mistakes. That's how you do it." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. "That's how you do it." "Yeah," she said. "You learn. And you don't stop trying." She paused, and then she said, "Are you going to stop trying?" "No," Marcus said. "I'm not going to stop trying." "Okay," she said. "Then you can be my dad." She said it so matter-of-factly, like she was confirming a fact she'd already decided. Marcus didn't know what to do with that certainty. He'd never had anyone believe in him without conditions, without contracts, without fine print. She was giving him something he didn't deserve, and he was terrified he'd break it. "Come here," he said, and she came to him. He knelt down and pulled her into a hug. She was so small, so impossibly small, and she fit against his chest like she'd been made to be there. "I'm going to do my best," he said into her hair. "I promise." "I know," she said. "That's why I chose you." The days that followed were a blur of paperwork and parenting classes. Marcus attended the classes with a focus he usually reserved for hostile takeovers. He took notes. He asked questions. He listened to other prospective foster parents talk about their motivations, their fears, their hopes, and he found himself relating to them in ways he'd never expected. "I just want to give a kid a chance," one man said. He was a construction worker, rough hands, kind eyes. "I didn't have much growing up. I want to give someone what I didn't have." Marcus understood that. He understood it more than he wanted to admit. He'd grown up with nothing, no money, no stability, no love. His father had been a drunk who spent what little he earned on whiskey. His mother had left when he was 12, and he'd never seen her again. He'd built his empire from the ground up, brick by brick, wall by wall. He'd told himself he didn't need anyone. He'd told himself he was better off alone. But now, sitting in a fluorescent-lit room with a bunch of strangers who wanted to do something good, he realized how wrong he'd been. "You're quiet today," the instructor said to him during a break. Her name was Carla, and she had the kind of calm, steady energy that made people want to open up. "I'm listening," Marcus said. "You're also thinking. I can see it. What's going through your head?" He hesitated. He wasn't used to being asked questions like that. He wasn't used to being seen. "I'm thinking about my father," he said, "and how I swore I'd never be like him. And now I'm here, trying to be someone else's father, and I don't know if I can do it." Carla nodded. "That's a good sign. Good sign. People who think they have all the answers are the ones who make the biggest mistakes. People who worry about being bad parents are usually the ones who end up being good parents. You care. That's what matters." Marcus didn't know if that was true. He wanted it to be true. He needed it to be true. He went home that evening and found Ellie in the kitchen. She'd discovered the pantry and had organized the canned goods by size and color. It was a small thing, but it told him so much about her. Her need for order, her need for control, her need for something to hold on to. "Hey," he said. "How was your day?" She shrugged. "Fine." The lady came again, the one with the clipboard. She asked me more questions. "What kind of questions?" "The usual ones. What do you like to eat? What do you like to do? Do you feel safe?" She paused. I told her I feel safe. Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest. "Good. That's good." She looked at him. "I also told her you're my dad now." "Did she say anything?" "She said that was nice. She didn't say anything about it being wrong. So I think it's okay." She paused again, and then she said, "I didn't mean to make it weird. I just wanted her to know." "It's not weird," Marcus said. "It's not weird at all." The home visit was approved. The paperwork was finalized. Marcus Webb, billionaire CEO and self-proclaimed emotional fortress, became the legal foster parent of Elena Cruz. It happened on a Thursday, in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and stale air, with a judge who looked like he'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Mr. Webb," the judge said, "this is a significant responsibility. Do you understand what you're undertaking?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marcus said. "And do you, Elena, understand that Mr. Webb is agreeing to take care of you, but that this is a legal arrangement subject to review?" Ellie looked at the judge with those steady eyes. "He's my dad," she said. "That's all I need to understand." The judge smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. "Well then, I don't think we need to ask any more questions." Afterward, they went out for ice cream. It was Marcus's idea. He'd never taken anyone out for ice cream before, and he wasn't sure if he was doing it right. But Ellie looked happy, and that was all that mattered. "Do you think my mom knows?" she asked, licking her cone. "Knows what?" "That I'm here. That I'm safe." Marcus considered the question. He'd thought about Maria Cruz a lot in the past few weeks. He'd had his people look for her. They'd found nothing. She'd vanished like she'd never existed, leaving behind nothing but a trail of broken promises. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But if she does, I hope she's happy that you're safe." Ellie nodded. She seemed to accept that. She was good at accepting things. It was one of the things that broke his heart the most. "Marcus," she said, using his name instead of Dad. He'd noticed she did that sometimes, like she was testing to see if he'd still be there when she wasn't being what he wanted. "Yeah. Are you going to marry someone?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it." "I don't want you to," she said. "Not if it means they'll leave." Marcus set down his ice cream. "Ellie, no one's going to leave. You're not leaving." "I'm not leaving. That's not how it works." "That's how it worked with my mom," she said. "She got married to my dad, and then she left." Marcus didn't know what to say. He didn't have the words to untangle that knot. So he just said, "I'm not your mom. And if I ever get married, it's going to be to someone who won't leave. Because you're my priority now. You're always going to be my priority." She looked at him for a long time. And then she nodded. "Okay," she said. "I'll trust you." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events in his mind. He was a father now. A father. The word felt foreign and heavy and terrifying and wonderful. He'd spent his whole life avoiding responsibility for anything beyond the bottom line. And now he was responsible for a tiny human being. He went to check on her, as he did every night. She was in her bed, curled up in a ball, clutching the rose he'd given her. She was talking in her sleep, murmuring words he couldn't quite catch. "Dad," she said, clear as a bell. "Dad, don't go." Marcus sat down on the edge of her bed. He reached out and touched her hair, smoothing it back from her face. "I'm here," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She settled. He stayed until her breathing evened out. The phone rang at 2 a.m. Marcus grabbed it before it could wake her, his heart pounding. "Mr. Webb," a voice said. It was his lawyer. "I'm sorry to call so late, but we have information about Elena's mother. Maria Cruz has been found." The world tilted. Where? She was in a hospital. A county hospital, about 200 miles north. She was admitted 2 weeks ago. Drug overdose. She's been unresponsive since. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. "Is she going to make it?" The lawyer paused. "It's not looking good. The hospital contacted child services. They're going to want to talk to you." Marcus looked at Ellie, sleeping peacefully. He thought about what she'd said. "I don't think she's coming back." And now it was true. She wasn't coming back. She'd been gone for a long time, but now she was really gone. "What do I do?" he asked. "There's nothing to do right now," the lawyer said. "Wait. Be there for Elena. The rest will unfold as it unfolds." Marcus hung up the phone. He sat in the dark for a long time, staring at nothing. He didn't know how to feel. Anger, maybe. Sadness. Relief. All of them were mixed together in a tangle he couldn't untie. "I won't let this hurt her," he said to himself. "I won't let it." But he knew, even as he said it, that there was nothing he could do to protect her from the truth. Maria Cruz was dying. And when she was gone, Ellie would be truly alone. That he went back to her room. He lay down on the floor beside her bed, his back against the wall, and he watched her sleep. He watched the rise and fall of her chest, the flutter of her eyelids, the small sounds she made. And he made a promise to himself, to her, to whatever gods might be listening. "I'll be here," he said, "every day, until I can't be." It was the only promise he knew how to keep. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and something else, something that Marcus recognized from the final days of his own father. It was the smell of a body giving up, of organs shutting down, of the slow, inexorable slide toward nothing. He stood in the doorway, his hand on the frame, and he looked at the woman in the bed. Maria Cruz was thinner than he'd expected. He'd seen photos, pulled from old records, but they hadn't prepared him for the reality. Her face was gaunt, her skin sallow, her hair a tangled mess on the pillow. There were tubes coming out of her arms, machines beeping around her, and she was so still she might have been carved from stone. "She's been like this for 3 weeks, the nurse said quietly. "We're keeping her comfortable, but there's no brain activity. She's not coming back." Marcus nodded. He didn't know what to say. He'd come alone, without Ellie, because he couldn't bear to bring her here. He'd told her he had a business meeting. He'd seen the suspicion in her eyes, the way she'd watched him with that too-old gaze, and he'd hated himself for the lie. But he couldn't do it. He couldn't make her see this. "How did she end up here?" he asked. "Someone found her in an alley. She was already unconscious. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was in cardiac arrest." The nurse paused. "We found an ID in her pocket. It took us a while to trace her. She didn't have any contact information. No emergency contacts. No one looking for her." Marcus looked at the woman in the bed. He should have felt angry. She'd abandoned her child. She'd left her to the streets, to the cold, to the mercy of strangers. She'd chosen drugs over her own daughter. He had every right to hate her. But all he felt was sadness. A deep, bone-deep sadness for the woman who had failed so completely. She'd been someone once. She'd been a mother. She'd held her daughter and made promises and believed, maybe, that she could keep them. And then she'd fallen apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. "Mr. Webb," the nurse said, "there's something you should know." Before she was admitted, she was conscious. She kept saying something. "What?" she kept saying. "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I didn't mean to leave." The nurse paused. She was talking about a daughter. "We assumed it was Elena. We didn't know her name until we traced the records." Marcus felt his throat close up. He looked at Maria Cruz, at the stillness of her body, and he thought about the last words she'd ever spoken. She was sorry. She didn't mean to leave. It wasn't much. It wasn't nearly enough. But it was something. He walked to the side of the bed. He looked down at her face. Her eyes were closed. Her lips were parted slightly. She looked peaceful, In a way he hadn't expected. I have her, he said quietly. I have Elena. She's safe. She's with me. She's happy. He paused. I know you couldn't be there. I know you tried. But she's okay. I promise. I'll take care of her. Maria Cruz didn't respond. She couldn't. But Marcus felt a strange sense of release, like he'd said something that needed to be said. Call me when she passes, he said to the nurse. I'll make the arrangements. He left the hospital and walked to his car. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds. He got in and sat for a long time, his hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. When he got back to the penthouse, Ellie was waiting for him. She was sitting at the kitchen island, coloring, but she looked up when he walked in, and he saw the question in her eyes. Where did you go? She asked. Just a meeting, Marcus said. Nothing important. She looked at him. She didn't believe him. He could see it. But she didn't push. She'd learned not to push. Did you have a good day? He asked, changing the subject. Okay, she said. The lady came again. The one with the clipboard. She asked more questions. About what? About you. She asked if you were nice to me. If you yelled at me. If you hit me. She paused. I told her you don't yell. You look like you want to sometimes, but you don't. Marcus felt a pang of guilt. He had wanted to yell, sometimes. When she'd spilled juice on the white carpet. When she'd hidden his phone as a joke. When she'd woken him up at 3 a.m. with a nightmare. He'd wanted to yell, but he'd held it in. He hadn't known she'd noticed. I'm trying not to yell, he said. I know, she said. That's what I told her. I said he's trying. That's what matters. Ellie's mother died 3 days later. The call came at 4 p.m., right in the middle of a meeting. Marcus excused himself, walked into the hallway, and listened to the nurse's clinical explanation. She'd passed peacefully, no pain. The machines had been turned off. It was over. Marcus stood in the hallway and felt nothing. It was strange. He'd expected something. Anger, grief, relief. Something. But there was only emptiness. He'd never met Maria Cruz. He'd never heard her voice, except for the echoes of her absence. She'd been a ghost to him, a shadow. And now she was gone. He went back to the meeting. He finished it. He made decisions about things that didn't matter. And then he went home to Ellie. She was watching TV in the living room, curled up on the couch. She looked up when he came in, and she must have seen something on his face because she sat up straight. What's wrong? She asked. Marcus sat down beside her. He took a breath. He'd rehearsed this 1,000 times, but now that it was here, he didn't know how to say it. Ellie, he said, I need to tell you something. She stared at him. He could see her bracing, the same way she braced for everything. She was so good at bracing, at preparing for the worst. It was the thing he hated most about her. Your mom, he said. She's gone. She died. Ellie didn't react. She just sat there, still as a statue, her face unreadable. She was in the hospital, Marcus continued. She was sick. She couldn't get better. But she said something before she died. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't mean to leave. Ellie was silent for a long time. Then she said, Did you see her? Yes. What did she look like? Marcus thought about it. He chose his words carefully. She looked sad and tired, but she looked like someone who loved you. I could see that. Ellie nodded slowly. She was processing. He could tell. She was building walls inside herself, walls to hold back the flood. I always thought she'd come back, she finally said. I knew she wouldn't, but I still thought maybe she would. Does that make sense? Yes, Marcus said. It makes perfect sense. I don't want to cry, she said. Her voice was steady, but her chin was trembling. I don't want to be sad. It's okay to be sad, Marcus said. It's okay to cry. Will you hold me? He opened his arms, and she climbed into them. She was so small, so light, and she buried her face in his chest and started to cry. It was a quiet cry, the kind that came from somewhere deep. He held her and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. They stayed like that for a long time. The TV flickered in the background. The city hummed below them. And Marcus Webb held his daughter and let her grieve for the mother who'd left her. Marcus, she finally said, her voice muffled against his shirt. What? Am I going to be okay? Marcus thought about it. He thought about all the things she'd been through. All the loss. All the pain. All the nights under the bridge. And he thought about the way she'd given him that flower. A single act of hope in the middle of a storm. Yes, he said. You're going to be okay. I'm going to make sure of it. She pulled back and looked at him. Her eyes were red. Her cheeks were wet. But there was something in her face that hadn't been there before. Resolve. Determination. The same quality he'd seen in her father's records, in the way he'd kept going even when everything was against him. I'm not going to be like her, she said. Like who? My mom. I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to stop trying. Marcus pulled her closer. You're not going to leave. You're not going to stop trying. And neither am I. They sat in the silence of the penthouse, and Marcus thought about all the things he'd learned in the past few weeks. He'd learned how to be patient. He'd learned how to be gentle. He'd learned how to be present. And he'd learned that love wasn't a transaction. It wasn't something you gave in exchange for something else. It was something you gave because you had to, because it was the only thing that made sense. Dad, Ellie said. It was the first time she'd used the word since that day in the kitchen. Marcus felt his heart catch. Yeah, I love you. Marcus blinked. Tears pricked at his eyes. He hadn't expected that. He didn't know if he deserved it. But he felt it, like a warm wave spreading through his chest. I love you too, he said. More than anything. She smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. And in that moment, Marcus Webb knew that everything he'd done, everything he'd built, everything he'd sacrificed, it had all been leading to this. He was a father. He had a daughter. And he was finally, truly, home. The first time Marcus forgot to pick Ellie up from school, he was in a boardroom with 17 angry investors and a spreadsheet that refused to balance. He looked at his phone at 3:47 p.m., saw the missed calls from the school, and felt his stomach drop like he'd just stepped off a cliff. He excused himself mid-sentence. He didn't care what they thought. He ran out of the building, got in his car, and drove like a man possessed. The school was 20 minutes away. He made it in 12. Ellie was sitting on the steps outside the front door. She was alone. Her backpack was beside her, and she was drawing in the dirt with a stick. She looked up when he pulled into the parking lot, and her face was completely blanked. I'm sorry, Marcus said, scrambling out of the car. I'm so sorry. I lost track of time. It's okay, she said. I knew you'd come. She said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that it broke something in him. She'd been waiting. She'd been sitting there, alone, watching other kids get picked up by their parents, and she'd just waited. Because she was used to waiting. She was used to being forgotten. I won't let it happen again, he said. I promise. Okay, she said. She picked up her backpack and walked to the car. She didn't say anything else. Marcus drove home in silence. His hands were shaking on the wheel. He'd made a mistake. A stupid, careless mistake. And she'd just accepted it, because that's what she did. She accepted everything. She didn't get angry. She didn't cry. She just waited. Ellie, he said when they got to the penthouse. I need you to know something. She looked at him. Her eyes were tired. She'd been tired since the day he met her. If I ever forget again, you can yell at me. You can get angry. You can tell me I'm an idiot. I deserve it. But I don't want you to just sit there and wait for me. You're not invisible. You're not something I can just put aside. She considered this. But you came, she said. I came, he agreed. But that doesn't make it okay. What I did was wrong. And I want you to know that I know it's wrong. And I want you to tell me when I mess up. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, my mom used to forget me too. She'd leave me at the store. Or at the park. She'd say she was coming back, and I'd wait, and she'd forget. And then she'd come back and say she was sorry. And I'd say it was okay. Because I didn't want her to be sad. Marcus knelt down in front of her. Ellie, I'm not your mom. And you don't have to protect me from being sad. That's not your job. Your job is to be a kid. My job is to take care of you. And if I'm not doing my job, you can tell me. She looked at him, and he could see the war going on inside her. The part of her that had learned to survive by being invisible. The part of her that was afraid to ask for anything, because asking meant being disappointed. What if I get mad and you leave? She asked. I'm not leaving, he said. I'm never leaving. I promise. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said. I'll try. Good, he said. That's all I ask. The next day, Marcus set 3 alarms on his phone. He told his assistant to block out the time. He made sure he was at the school 15 minutes early. When Ellie came out, he was standing by the car, waiting for her. She smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. You came, she said. I came, he said. I'm always going to come. They went for ice cream. It was becoming a tradition, something they did on Fridays. Ellie always got the same flavor, chocolate chip with rainbow sprinkles. She said it reminded her of her father, because he used to take her for ice cream after school. He didn't have a lot of money, she said. So we'd share one. He'd let me have most of it. He sounds like a good man, Marcus said. He was, she said. He used to say, Ellie, you're the best thing I ever did. And I'd say, you're the best thing I ever did too. Marcus smiled. He could picture it. A tired janitor with a big heart and a little girl who adored him. It was a simple picture, but it was beautiful. Can I tell you something? Ellie asked. Of course. I don't want you to feel bad. But sometimes I miss him so much it hurts. And I think about him, and I wonder if he's watching me. And I want him to know that I'm okay. That I'm with you, and you're taking care of me. And I want him to be proud. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. He is proud, he said. I know he is. How do you know? Because I'm proud of you. And I'm just a guy who found you on the street. He's your father. He loved you more than anything. If I'm proud, imagine how proud he is. Ellie squeezed his hand. Thanks, she said. That helps. They finished their ice cream. They went home. And that night, when Marcus tucked her into bed, she said something that made his heart clenched. Dad, yeah, can I show you something? She reached under her pillow and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It was worn and frayed at the edges, like it had been opened and refolded 1,000 times. She handed it to him. Marcus unfolded it. It was a drawing. A child's drawing, done in crayon. There was a stick figure man with a big smile. There was a stick figure girl with pigtails. And there was a flower, a big yellow flower, drawn in the center of the page. My dad drew it for me, she said. On the day he died. He was in the hospital, and he was so tired. But he asked for crayons. He said he wanted to draw me something. And he drew that. He said, Ellie, this is us. We're together, even when we're not. Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. He looked at the drawing, at the crooked lines and the bright colors. He looked at the flower in the middle of the page. I've been carrying it with me ever since, she said. It's the only thing I have from him. Marcus handed the drawing back to her. Keep it safe, he said. It's precious. I know, she said. That's why I'm showing you. Because you're precious too. She said it so simply, so naturally, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And Marcus felt something shift inside him. He'd spent his whole life building walls. He'd spent his whole life protecting himself from vulnerability, from connection, from the risk of being hurt. And now, in the span of a few months, this little girl had dismantled every single one of them. Ellie, he said, his voice rough. I need you to know something. What? You're the best thing that ever happened to me. I don't know how I got so lucky, but I'm grateful. Every single day. She looked at him with those enormous eyes. And then she said, You're the best thing that ever happened to me too. Marcus leaned down and kissed her forehead. Good night, Ellie. Good night, Dad. He turned off the light and walked to the door. He paused, looking back at her. She was already snuggled under the covers, her drawing clutched to her chest. I love you, he said. I love you too, she said. And Marcus Webb closed the door and stood in the hallway. And he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt holed up the next morning. Marcus found himself thinking about the future. He'd always been a planner, always thinking 5 steps ahead. But with Ellie, the future was different. It wasn't about deals or mergers or quarterly earnings. It was about schools and birthday parties and bedtime stories. I need to think about what comes next, he said to Patricia Hollis at their monthly check-in. What do you mean? She asked. I mean, she's in school. She's doing well. But what about when she's older? What about college? What about? He stopped. He didn't want to say it. But he had to. What about if something happens to me? Patricia looked at him with those kind, knowing eyes. You're thinking about permanency. I'm thinking about making sure she's taken care of. No matter what. That's what a father does, she said. You're already doing it. Marcus nodded. I want to adopt her. Legally. Permanently. I want her to be my daughter in every way that matters. Patricia smiled. I was wondering when you'd say that. Is it possible? It's possible, she said. It's not simple. There's paperwork, interviews, a whole process. But it's possible. And given everything I've seen, I think it's the right thing to do. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank you, he said. I'll do whatever it takes. Ellie's been through a lot, Patricia said. But she's resilient. And she has you. That makes all the difference. Marcus thought about that. He thought about the flower. He thought about the drawing. He thought about all the small, precious moments that had brought them to this point. I'm going to make sure she has everything, he said. Everything I never had. Patricia nodded. I know you will. That night, Marcus sat down with Ellie. He told her about his decision. He explained what adoption meant, that it would make him her father legally, That it would mean she was his forever. Do you want that? He asked. Do you want me to adopt you? Ellie looked at him. There was a long pause. Then she said, You're already my dad. The papers don't change that. I know, he said. But I want it to be official. I want everyone to know. I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. She thought about it. She was always thinking about things, weighing them, measuring them. Okay, she finally said. I want that. Good, Marcus said. Then we'll do it. They sat in the quiet of the penthouse, and Marcus felt something settle in his chest. A peace he'd never known. Dad, Ellie said, Yeah. Can I give you a flower? Marcus blinked. You already gave me one. Remember the dandelion? I know, she said. But I want to give you another one. To celebrate. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small, crumpled flower. It was a daisy, picked from somewhere, its petals slightly bruised. She held it out to him with both hands. Sir, she said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Can I give you a flower? Marcus took the daisy. He looked at it, and he looked at her. And he laughed. It was a real laugh, from the belly, the kind he hadn't made in years. Yes, he said. You can give me a flower. She smiled, that wide, beautiful smile. And Marcus Webb, the cold-blooded CEO who'd never shed a tear in public, felt tears stream down his face. But they were happy tears. For the first time in his life, they were happy tears that the adoption hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday. Marcus had been counting down the days, circling them on his calendar like a child waiting for Christmas. Ellie had been quiet about it, too quiet, and he'd noticed the way she'd started withdrawing in the days leading up to it. Ellie, he said on Monday night. What's wrong? She was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled up to her chest. She didn't look at him. Nothing. Come on. I know that's not true. You've been quiet all day. She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, What if they say no? They won't say no. Everything's been approved. It's just a formality. But what if they do? Her voice was small, fragile. What if they decide I can't stay? What if they take me away? Marcus sat down beside her. He put his arm around her, and she leaned into him. Ellie, they're not going to take you away. You're my daughter. That's not going to change. But I'm not really your daughter. Not yet. Papers don't make a family, he said. You and me, we're already a family. The adoption just makes it official. It doesn't change anything about how I feel about you. She was quiet. He could feel her thinking, feel the weight of her fears pressing down on her. I'm scared, she finally said. I'm scared that something's going to go wrong. That's what always happens. Something goes wrong, and I end up alone. Marcus pulled her closer. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to let it happen. How do you know? He thought about it. He thought about all the ways he'd failed people in the past, all the deals he'd walked away from, all the relationships he'd abandoned. He knew he had a history of letting people down. But with Ellie, it was different. She was different, because I've never wanted anything as much as I want this, he said. I've never fought for anything as hard as I'm fighting for you. And I'm not going to stop. She looked up at him, her eyes wet with tears she was trying not to shed. Promise. I promise. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said. I'll try not to be scared. That's all I ask. The courthouse was old and imposing, with marble floors and high ceilings that made everything echo. Marcus had worn his best suit, the one he saved for board meetings and negotiations. Ellie was in a dress he'd bought her for the occasion, a simple blue thing that matched her eyes. She kept tugging at the hem, like she wasn't sure it was really hers. Stop fidgeting, he whispered. I can't help it, she whispered back. I'm nervous. Me too. She looked up at him, surprised. You're nervous, terrified, he said. But I'm not going to let it show. She smiled. It was a small, conspiratorial smile, like they were in on a secret together. Okay, she said. I won't let it show either. The judge was an older man with kind eyes and a voice that carried authority without being harsh. He looked at the paperwork, looked at Marcus, looked at Ellie. Mr. Webb, he said, I've read the file. I've spoken to the social worker. I understand that this is an unusual case. Yes, Your Honor, Marcus said. You found this child on the street. You brought her into your home. You've been caring for her ever since. Yes, Your Honor. The judge leaned forward. Why? It was a simple question, but it cut to the heart of everything. Marcus thought about all the reasons. The flower, the rain, the way she'd seen through his walls, the way she'd made him feel like he mattered, because she needed someone, he said. And I needed her. I didn't know it until I met her. But I needed her. The judge nodded slowly. He turned to Ellie. Elena, Do you understand what's happening today? Yes, Your Honor, she said. Her voice was clear and steady. Marcus felt a surge of pride. And do you want Mr. Webb to adopt you? Yes, Your Honor. Why? She thought about it. Because he's my dad, she said. He's already my dad. I just want everyone to know. The judge smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. Well, then, he said, I don't think there's anything more to discuss. He signed the papers. The clerk stamped them. And just like that, Ellie was his daughter. Legally. Permanently. Forever. Marcus felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He looked at Ellie, and she was crying, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Ellie, he said. What's wrong? Nothing, she said. I'm happy. I'm just happy. He knelt down and pulled her into a hug. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on like she was never going to let go. We did it, he said. We actually did it. I know, she said. I can't believe it. Believe it, he said. It's real. You're mine. And I'm yours. Forever. They went out for lunch afterward. A fancy restaurant, because Marcus wanted to celebrate. Ellie ordered chicken fingers and fries, which the waiter served on a plate that cost more than most people's meals. She ate with a solemnity that made Marcus smile. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. What happens now? He'd been thinking about that. The future. The endless possibilities. Now we live, he said. We have a life. We do normal things. We go to school. We have dinner together. We celebrate birthdays and holidays. We just live. Is that it? Isn't it enough? She thought about it. Yeah, she said. It's enough. They finished their meal. They went home. And that night, when Marcus tucked her into bed, she said something that made his heart swell. Dad, yeah, I'm going to sleep better tonight. Because I know you're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere, he said. I promise. She smiled and closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was asleep. Marcus stood in the doorway and watched her. He'd done a lot of things in his life. He'd built companies and made fortunes and changed the world in ways that would outlive him. But none of it compared to this. None of it compared to being her father. The next morning, Marcus found himself in his study, staring at the dandelion in its glass case. He'd kept it in his office, where he could see it every day. It was a reminder of where he'd come from, of who he'd become. Hey, Ellie said, coming into the room. She was still in her pajamas, her hair a wild mess. What are you looking at? The flower, he said. The one you gave me. She walked over and looked at it. It's all flat now. I preserved it. So I'd always remember. Remember what? He thought about it. Remember that sometimes the smallest things are the most important. Remember that someone saw me, even when I was invisible. Remember that I have someone who loves me. She looked up at him. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Ellie. She reached up and took his hand. Can we go get ice cream today? Sure, he said. We can get ice cream every day if you want. Really, no. That would be bad for you. But you can have ice cream today. She laughed. It was a bright, happy sound. And Marcus Webb, the cold-blooded CEO, laughed with her. They went for ice cream. They sat in the same place, at the same table. Ellie got her usual chocolate chip with rainbow sprinkles. Marcus got coffee, because he'd never liked sweet things. Dad, she said, yeah, I'm really glad you found me. He reached across the table and took her hand. I'm really glad you found me too. She squeezed his hand. And for a moment, the world was perfect. That Marcus had a lot of things to figure out still. There were challenges ahead, hurdles he couldn't see yet. But in that moment, with his daughter's hand in his, none of it mattered. Sir, Ellie said, her eyes dancing. Can I give you a flower? She pulled a napkin out of her pocket. It was crumpled, and on it, she'd drawn a flower. A yellow one, with a stem and leaves. It's not real, she said. But it's from me. So it counts. Marcus took the napkin. He looked at it. He looked at her. It counts, he said. It counts more than anything. And for the first time in his life, Marcus Webb felt like he'd finally arrived at where he was meant to be. That the first sign that something was wrong came on a Saturday. Marcus was in his study, reviewing quarterly reports, when Ellie walked in with a drawing in her hand. She looked pale, paler than usual, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Dad, she said, her voice thin. I don't feel good. He looked up. What's wrong? My stomach hurts. And I'm tired. Really tired. Marcus set down his papers. He walked over to her and put his hand on her forehead. She was burning up. You have a fever, he said. Why didn't you say something earlier? Didn't want to bother you, she said. You were working. He felt a pang of guilt. He'd been working too much, he knew that. He'd been trying to make up for lost time, trying to prove that he could be both a CEO and a father. And in the process, he'd missed the fact that his daughter was sick. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you to bed." He carried her to her room, tucked her in, and called the doctor. The doctor came, examined her, and said it was probably just a virus. Rest, fluids, and she'd be fine in a few days. But she wasn't fine. The fever didn't break. It got worse. She started coughing, a deep, rattling cough that made Marcus's chest ache. He stayed up with her at night, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "Dad," she said one night, her voice barely a whisper. "Am I going to die?" The question hit him like a physical blow. He'd been asking himself the same thing, but he hadn't wanted to admit it. "No," he said firmly. "You're not going to die. You're going to get better. I'm going to make sure of it. Promise, I promise." He took her to the hospital the next day. The emergency room was crowded, noisy, chaotic. Marcus pulled out his phone and made calls. Within an hour, Ellie was in a private room with the best pediatrician in the city. They ran tests. They did scans. They drew blood. And then the doctor came in with a look on his face that made Marcus's blood run cold. "Mr. Webb," he said, "we need to talk." The diagnosis was pneumonia. Severe, complicated pneumonia. Her lungs were filled with fluid. Her oxygen levels were dangerously low. They were going to admit her. They were going to put her on a ventilator. "Will she be okay?" Marcus asked. His voice was shaking. He couldn't help it. "It's too early to say," the doctor said. "We're going to do everything we can." Marcus sat in the waiting room for 8 hours. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He just sat there, staring at the wall, replaying every moment of their time together. He thought about the rain. He thought about the flower. He thought about the day she'd called him dad for the first time. He thought about all the moments he'd taken for granted, all the moments he'd spent working when he could have been with her. "I'm sorry," he said to no one. "I'm so sorry." The nurse came out and told him he could see her. He walked into the room and felt his heart break. Ellie was in the bed, surrounded by machines, her small body looking even smaller against the white sheets. There was a tube in her throat, and her eyes were closed. "Ellie," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He sat down beside her bed. He took her hand. It was cold, so cold, and he held it like it was the most precious thing in the world. The days that followed were a blur. Marcus canceled everything. He didn't take calls. He didn't check emails. He stayed by her bedside, talking to her, reading to her, just being there. And then, on the 4th day, she opened her eyes. "Dad," she said, her voice raspy. "You're here." "I'm here," he said. "I've always been here." She smiled. It was a weak smile, but it was real. "I knew you would be." "Ellie, I need to tell you something." He leaned forward, his forehead touching hers. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every moment I wasn't there. I'm sorry for every time I put work before you. I'm sorry for everything." "It's okay," she said. "You're here now." "I'm here now," he said. "And I'm never going to leave again. I promise." She squeezed his hand. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, Ellie." She got better. Slowly, painfully, she got better. The ventilator came out. The tubes came out. She started eating again, started talking again, started laughing again. And Marcus watched her heal, and he felt something shift inside him. He'd been so focused on proving himself, on being a good father, on doing everything right. But being a father wasn't about perfection. It was about presence. It was about showing up, day after day, no matter what. "Dad," Ellie said one evening. They were in her room, and she was eating soup. "Yeah. Are you going to go back to work?" He thought about it. He'd been thinking about it a lot. "I'm going to change some things," he said. "I'm going to spend more time with you. I'm going to be here more. Promise." "I promise." He meant it. He started delegating more. He started working from home. He started being present in ways he'd never been before. And Ellie, his brave, beautiful daughter, started to thrive. The garden was Marcus's idea. He'd never been a gardener. He'd never even owned a plant. But after Ellie got out of the hospital, he'd found himself wanting to create something that would last, something that would grow and bloom, and remind them both of how far they'd come. "I don't know anything about flowers," he told her. "But I want to learn." She looked at him with those knowing eyes. "You want to learn? With you. Together. We can figure it out." They started small. A few pots on the balcony. Some soil from the garden center. Seeds that Ellie picked out herself. Sunflowers. Because they were tall and brave and yellow like the dandelion she'd given him that first night that the first seeds didn't sprout. Marcus had overwatered them. He'd felt terrible, like he'd failed at something simple, but Ellie just laughed. It's okay, Dad. You're learning. He learned. They learned together. They read books about soil and sunlight and the secret lives of plants. Ellie was a natural, her small hands gentle with the seedlings. Marcus was clumsy, but he tried. He tried harder than he'd ever tried at anything. And then, one morning, they walked out onto the balcony and saw the first sprout. A tiny green shoot, pushing up through the soil like a declaration of survival. Dad, Ellie whispered. Look. He looked, and he felt tears prick at his eyes. It's alive, he said. We did it. We did it, she agreed. They watched the sunflowers grow. They grew tall, impossibly tall. Their yellow faces turned toward the sun. They were beautiful. They were defiant. They were everything Marcus had never known he needed. I used to think I was alone, he said one evening. They were sitting on the balcony, watching the sun set over the city. The sunflowers swayed in the breeze, their petals catching the last of the light. Ellie looked at him. You're not alone. I know. I'm not alone anymore. She leaned against him, and he put his arm around her. She was warm, solid, real. She was his daughter. She was everything. Dad, she said, do you think my real dad would be proud of me? Marcus thought about it. He thought about Daniel Cruz, the janitor who'd made her soup, who'd drawn her pictures, who'd loved her until his last breath. He thought about all the ways Ellie had survived, all the ways she'd thrived. Of course he would, Marcus said. He'd be so proud, Ellie. He'd be amazed at who you are. Who am I? He looked at her. His brave, beautiful daughter. The girl who'd given him a flower in the rain. You're the most incredible person I've ever met, he said. You're kind. You're strong. You're brave. You're everything a father could want. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, you're everything a daughter could want too. The sunflowers bloomed. They filled the balcony with color, with life, with hope. Marcus and Ellie spent their evenings there, talking about everything and nothing. I want to do something, Marcus said one night. Something to remember your father. Something to honor him. Ellie looked at him. Like what? I want to start a scholarship. At the school where he worked. For kids whose parents can't afford it. In his name. She thought about it. Really. He dedicated his life to making things better for other people. I want to make sure his legacy lives on. She was quiet for a long time. And then she said, can I help? Of course. It's your father. It's your legacy too. They worked on it together. They met with the school board. They set up the fund. They named it the Daniel Cruz Memorial Scholarship. It was a small thing in the grand scheme of things, but it meant everything. The first recipient is a girl named Maria, Marcus said one day. She's 8. Her mother works 2 jobs. She wants to be a teacher. Ellie looked at him. She's like me. She's like you. Marcus agreed. And she's going to have a chance because of you and your father. Ellie nodded slowly. He would have liked that. I know he would. The scholarship ceremony was held at the school. Marcus and Ellie sat in the front row. The principal spoke. The teachers spoke. And then Maria, a shy girl with pigtails and a wide smile, stood up and accepted the award. I want to thank Mr. Cruz, she said. I never met him, but my mom told me about him. She said he was always kind, always helping. She said he was the best person she knew. I want to be like him. I want to make him proud. Marcus looked at Ellie. She was crying. Quietly, silently, she was crying. Are you okay? He whispered. She nodded. I'm happy. I'm just happy. After the ceremony, they walked out to the parking lot. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The flowers in the school garden were blooming. Dad, Ellie said, yeah, I have something to tell you. He turned to look at her. She was standing there, her hands behind her back, a smile on her face. I've been keeping a secret, she said. A good one. What is it? She brought her hands out from behind her back. In them was a flower. A dandelion, yellow and bright, its petals perfect. I found it in the garden, she said. I wanted to give it to you. Because I want you to know that I see you. I've always seen you. And I know you're sad sometimes, even when you pretend you're not. But I want you to know that you're not alone. I'm here. I'm always going to be here. Marcus looked at the flower. He looked at his daughter. And he remembered the rain, the bridge, the little girl who'd walked up to him and asked a question that had changed everything. Sir, she said, her voice soft. Can I give you a flower? Marcus took the dandelion. He held it in his hands like it was the most precious thing in the world. Yes, he said. You can give me a flower. Ellie smiled. And Marcus Webb, the man who had built an empire out of nothing, the man who had never let anyone close, the man who had forgotten how to feel. Marcus Webb bent down and wrapped his arms around his daughter. He held her like he'd never let go. I love you. He said, I love you too, Dad. They stood in the fading light, and the world around them seemed to pause. The flowers swayed. The sun set. And Marcus felt, for the first time in his life, that he had everything he'd ever needed. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, he said as she looked up at him. You're the best thing that ever happened to me too. And then she took his hand, and they walked to the car. The dandelion was in his other hand. He looked at it. It was perfect. It was hope. It was love. It was Ellie. Dad, she said as they got in the car. Yeah, what are we going to plant next? Marcus smiled. I was thinking roses. They're harder to grow, but I think we can figure it out. We can figure it out together, she said. Together, he agreed. That the car pulled away from the school. The sun set. The sky darkened. And somewhere, in the vast and indifferent universe, a janitor who had loved his daughter more than anything watched over them. And he smiled because his daughter was safe. His daughter was loved. His daughter was home. And so was Marcus.